Things actually turned out better than expected and easier than expected. And here is Saturn right now through my telescope using my DSLR camera, and you can definitely see its rings a bit. I mean, look at that. And I'm also currently recording right now so that I'll be able to use this for lucky imaging and get the most out of Saturn. Hi everyone, so in today's video I'll be photographing the planet Saturn tonight. And so this is not really my first time attempting to photograph Saturn, because the last time I did that was around last year, and it was a very difficult thing for me to do because Saturn itself is very small through my telescope, and the field of view required for me to get the planet's disk as well as Saturn's rings is very small. And considering I have an all-manual telescope, it only made things a whole lot more difficult, especially when it comes to centering Saturn in the field of view so that I will be able to capture Saturn properly. And so I'm gonna attempt the same thing tonight, just to improvise an image of Saturn that I took last year. And luckily, the thing about today is that today is the opposition of Saturn, which means that the planet Saturn is now at its closest to the Earth, as well as at its biggest in the night sky, which makes it the best time to photograph the planet Saturn. Well, in fact though, the best time to photograph the planets is when they are in opposition to the Earth, and that only happens to superior planets, which are planets beyond the orbit over the Earth, such as Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So opposition is the best time to photograph the planet Saturn, as well as all of the other planets beyond the Earth's orbit. Of course, Saturn itself won't be that big in the night sky and won't be that bright as the planet Jupiter, because Saturn is further away from Earth than Jupiter is, so it will still be very small through my telescope. So, same thing as usual, I'm going to use my Celestial Astromaster LT60AZ refractor telescope, and then attach my DSLR camera to my refractor telescope to photograph the planet Saturn, and use lucky imaging to get the most amount of detail from Saturn itself. And I will also use my smartphone when it comes to capturing Saturn tonight, so that I'll be able to compare the image that I can take of Saturn using my smartphone to that taken using my DSLR camera. And also, by the way, when it comes to photographing Saturn using my DSLR, it's just many times harder, because I could barely even see anything on the LCD screen of my DSLR when my camera is attached to my telescope, compared to attaching my smartphone to my telescope. However, there's a chance that I won't be able to properly photograph Saturn tonight, because even the last time I attempted to photograph Saturn last year, it took me around a few days just to be able to properly photograph Saturn itself. So if I won't be able to photograph Saturn tonight, then I might do it the following night or any of the succeeding nights, because even after tonight's opposition, Saturn will still be very close to the Earth, and so it's still an ideal time to photograph Saturn. And it won't be until many months later that you will have to wait for another Saturn opposition, so that Saturn will be big enough through your telescope for you to photograph. And since Jupiter is also going to be visible at the same time as Saturn tonight, then I will also attempt to photograph Jupiter after I photograph Saturn. But of course, the last time I attempted to photograph Jupiter, it was just a very terrible image that I didn't really post it. So tonight, if I can properly photograph Saturn, then I'm also attempting to photograph Jupiter as well, including its moons. But it's going to be a bit more challenging to get a proper image of Jupiter. So it's already 12 in the afternoon, so I'm gonna have to take my lunch and wait for nightfall itself to come, and if it's going to be clear skies tonight, then I will have an image of Saturn and perhaps even Jupiter to show you in this video. But don't expect it to be that high quality, but hey, at least we get to start somewhere, don't we? And after I take my lunch, I'll also be editing a bunch of Milky Way images I took while I was in my aunt's home last week. And it was actually 8 GB worth of images, and I already went through most of them. And there's still a little bit more for me to go through. So it won't just be an image of Saturn and Jupiter that I will be showing you at the end of this video, but also my latest Milky Way images I took last week, because I didn't feel like vlogging at the time. Okay, so I've already got my telescope set up here, and I'm now gonna have to point it towards Saturn and center it in the frame. And I'm still gonna have to use my smartphone first to photograph Saturn instead of using my DSLR. But after I use my smartphone, I will also photograph Saturn using my DSLR. And I also have my dog here, named Max, joining me for this astrophotography session.
A few moments later.
So I'm currently pointing my telescope at Jupiter right now because Saturn is just way too high up the sky, and it's really difficult for me to point my telescope at Saturn. But here is Jupiter right now through my telescope. You can definitely see its moons right there. Those small dots just right beside the planet Jupiter itself. It's just amazing being able to see Jupiter and its moons again after a very long time. So I will attempt to photograph Jupiter using my smartphone, and I will also attempt to capture a good image of Jupiter as well. And I'm also going to use this 2x Barlow lens to help me photograph the planet Jupiter as well. Things actually turned out better than expected and easier than expected. And here is Saturn right now through my telescope using my DSLR camera, and you can definitely see its rings a bit. I mean, look at that. And I'm also currently recording right now so that I'll be able to use this for lucky imaging and get the most out of Saturn. I mean, just look at that, you can definitely see its rings. Although, yeah, it's actually very grainy though. This is my first time doing it like this. Oh dear, some clouds are coming for Saturn right now. Okay, so things actually turned out better than expected, and I actually managed to capture Saturn very clearly too. And I was also definitely able to see Saturn's rings in very great detail. Although through my DSLR camera it wasn't really that good. But at least, hey, I actually had an easier time attempting to photograph Saturn tonight than I did last time. But now Saturn is already darker through my telescope, so I will attempt to photograph Saturn again tomorrow using my smartphone because I've already done it using my DSLR. So this is my final image of Saturn. Thanks to lucky imaging, I was able to sharpen Saturn a lot more and made its rings more distinct. All of it from the grainy footage I took of Saturn earlier. Of course, it is not that detailed when you zoom in since Saturn was just very small to my camera. If I had better equipment, I would surely be able to capture Saturn in greater detail than this. At least this is a step forward from the image I took of the planet last year, which was very pixelated and not that sharp. I simply used PIPP for the processing here, and sharpened the planet with Ridgestack 6 using the wavelets. Other than that, this is the video I took of Saturn using my smartphone through my telescope the following night. Much like the one I took using my DSLR, Saturn's rings are also distinct, but less detailed. However, this one's a bit shakier since the smartphone is not that heavy compared to my camera, making vibrations more prevalent, I think. I also took an image of Saturn using my smartphone afterward. This is just a single exposure and I didn't stack the images or did any lucky imaging this time around. However, you can still see its rings though, but it is not that sharp compared to the one I took using my camera. I did not take another image of Jupiter using my smartphone the following night, since I already did it the night before, but I did take one using my DSLR, but the result itself was just terrible. No matter what I did, I could not capture the cloud bands of Jupiter nor properly capture its moons. The moons are also not visible in the video mode of my camera, and both Jupiter and its moons had this weird chromatic aberration, which only made things worse for me. Besides, there was also no way for me to capture Jupiter and its moons without ending up with trails, since the shutter required was too long. In fact, the image I took of Jupiter using my smartphone is way better than the one taken by my DSLR through my telescope. Maybe I will come back to Jupiter soon when things are better for me, preferably when I get my hands on the star tracker. Before the night ended, I took a picture of both Jupiter and Saturn together in the night sky. I added a star glow effect in the two planets to further emphasize them, amidst a myriad of stars. It was surely a wonderful night despite the challenges that came along. So, to those of you who want to know how I captured Saturn like this, so that you can replicate the same thing, I first inserted my 20mm eyepiece into the eyepiece holder of my scope, and I attempted to locate Jupiter or Saturn. When that's done, I centered the planet in the frame and focused on it. I then carefully removed the 20mm eyepiece from my telescope and placed it in the 5x Barlow lens, where I then made sure that the planet is centered and in focus. When that's done, I carefully removed the Barlow lens from the telescope, removed the eyepiece, and placed the Barlow lens on my DSLR that already has a T-ring attached. Afterwards, I then carefully attached the assembly to the eyepiece holder of my telescope. If the planet is out of focus, I slowly adjusted the focus wheel to put it into proper focus, and made sure that the planet is still at the center of the frame. When all of that is done, I then made sure to stabilize my telescope so that I don't have to hold it anymore before I started recording. My method of capturing the planets is not perfect and it's not easy to begin with, but you will eventually get used to it later on. However, if you have better equipment than I do, then you will surely have an easier time doing planetary astrophotography than me. Other than that, these are some of the night sky images I took while I was in my aunt's home. Due to constant clear skies at the time, there were so many opportunities that I did not want to miss. My imagination simply went haywire at the time, and for an 8GB worth of image data, the opportunities were not wasted, and my landscape astrophotography skills were challenged as well. However, one of the best images I took at the time is this one of Row of Yuki, and this is by far my most detailed take on the cloud complex itself, especially for something taken from a Bordeaux Class 5 night sky. Another one is this Milky Way composite above a house, which made for a good foreground at the time. It was surely an amazing experience under the night sky. If you want to see more of these night sky images, please do follow me on Instagram in the description below. So that's it for this video guys, and I apologize if the ending is a bit boring since I had many things to share. But I also hope that you learned something new from how I captured Saturn that might help you to improve your planetary astrophotography skills. And if you're going out to enjoy the night sky anytime soon, I wish you good luck and clear skies and stay safe.